Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the South Florida Tribune Podcast. Yes, the South Florida Tribune Podcast, and we have a very special broadcast tonight. We welcome David Levin back on the air. David is up 5 hours north of I-95 in Jacksonville, the home of the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, the Jacksonville Jaguars, etc. Glad to have you back on, David. It's been a while, been too long. Glad to have you back. Look forward to having you when the situation presents itself. How the heck you feeling?
How you guys doing? Today has been full of rain and hope, but hey, there's Marlins baseball to get real excited about, which makes me happy.
Well, you've definitely seen a lot of the lean years with the Miami Marlins for sure. You know, I'm kind of like the new kid on the block where I really got more involved with them this year as the South Florida Tribune became more and more we got more involved, so to speak. And yeah, it's been one heck of a story, hasn't it? And I guess when we talk about a team that lost 105 games a year ago to where it is now, how can you not downplay the significance of what this team has really accomplished? Now, earlier today, it looks like Miami Marlins president of baseball operations, Michael Hill, believes that his club became stronger as a team after dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak that interrupted their season in late July and early August. And, you know, if there's anything to motivate them, you tell me something bigger than that one. I don't know.
It's the story of the year in terms of baseball, because remember when they played their first and second game, they looked like they could be a contender, and we kind of joked around about it. And then COVID wiped it out. They didn't play for 8 or 9 days, and you know the scrutiny that went on with the ball club and how there were questions about social distancing and practicing. And this is one of the best stories you could have in a 60-game season. I know we had talked before the season even started that I thought the Marlins would be a contender, but I didn't know if they'd make the playoffs. I thought they were ahead of schedule. So I'm pleasantly pleased with what manager Don Mattingly has done, and also the front office, Michael Hill, Derek Jeter. Got to give Dick Scott some credit there too. They may not go farther than the first round of the playoffs, but they may not need to, because it's still the best story that could be told.
Yeah, that's true. I know you mentioned Dick Scott. Of course, he has Yankee ties. I remember his ties back into the 1980s as well, when I worked with people like Barry Foote, Stump Merrill, and when you're a Yankee, you're tied in with that group. These guys are as loyal as you can definitely get.
And it's a lot like we had talked about before, where it's the Yankee way, and it's the Hank Steinberg Cashman plan, where Derek Jeter is following a playbook. So is Michael Hill, and it's working for them. And it's nice to see that it's ahead of schedule. I really thought next year would be the year that they make the big leap, but this is fun, Scott. You got to get me excited about it.
Yeah, well, I'm as excited as a guy like me is going to be even killed, like that guy called Don Mattingly, who's very even.
True.
But when you talk about the nature of the whole situation, of the original 30 players, 13 of them remain healthy throughout the year. That, to me, is just unbelievable when you take that stat by itself.
You say a prayer for that, because you really thought, let's say, after the first week of the Major League season, they weren't going to have baseball because the Cardinals and the Marlins kept on having to discuss players being sick and what are you going to do and social distancing, and it could have blown up in everybody's face. I know that you follow it because you're there for the press conferences and whatnot, so you see a different side of it. I look at it from the players' perspective, because a lot of the players came through the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, which is here. Right. They are the double A affiliate, and we haven't even talked about, and that's for another show, how not having minor league baseball this year, that was devastating. So I'm real happy. There are players on the roster that we discussed in pre-prep, that are making their appearances that had definite ties to Jacksonville. Sixto Sanchez, Levin Diaz, Jazz Chisholm. Brian Anderson played 2 years in Jacksonville before he was called up in 2017. The name escapes me. I'm sorry. I'm old. But there are enough players that you could fill up. Monty Harrison began his minor league career with the Marlins in Jacksonville. There are players that we can go on and on about. Edward Cabrera could possibly be added to the taxi squad for the playoffs. Jacksonville has a definite tie to the success of this team this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, judging by the names that you mentioned, and indeed they do. So when you talk about the Marlins, you put things in perspective, okay? You know, they missed over a week of action due to the outbreak that saw 18 players test positive. 18, that's a lot.
18 of the 60. That will decimate you.
Heard, yeah.
It speaks to the, what do you want to call it? The perseverance of the front office and what Don Mattingly had did this year. And I know you've become a real fan of Mattingly, having talked to him this year.
Right.
He has not gotten the credit that he is due. And I know that the first 4 seasons were wipeouts because he did not have a winning season after coming over from the Dodgers. But this is probably his best managerial job ever. And I'm hoping that he gets at least some recognition for Manager of the Year.
I hope so. Well, when you think about things for a moment, Hill said that 171 roster moves,
yes,
to be exact. And when you're talking about when you plan on players, you generally find them either hurting their arm or dealing with hamstrings and having to deal with these issues every 2 weeks, not every 2 seconds, so it seems.
Right. The fact that I find this most important, the everyday lineup kind of balances itself out because, as you know, any team can bring up a player or bring somebody over who can swing a stick. The pitching staff was destroyed. You know, Alcantara and Caleb Smith were on IR, and they didn't come back, till mid-season. Pablo Lopez became the workhorse. Jose Urena was also on the IL. Taking players like Robert Duggar or Daniel Castano or numerous other minor leaguers and say, okay, you're up, and they were out to go out there. They went out there and they performed. It wasn't bad baseball. This team probably could have won another 5 or 6 games if not for issues with hitting instead of pitching.
Mm-hmm. Well, Pablo Lopez is a stud. We all know what Sixto Sanchez is going to look like. They've been raving about him. He's got electric stuff. But
that 100-mile-an-hour fastball is real, by the way. I've seen it in person. That is sweet. It's nice.
I wouldn't want to be holding that catcher's glove.
No.
Well, it could be painful if it's not padded heavily, that's for sure. Take it from a guy that played the position before another million lifetimes ago. I know it can hurt.
I'm sure. It hurts, yeah. What are your thoughts on the team itself? I mean, is getting there enough, or are you expecting them possibly to get past the Cubs, which, I could flip a coin on that one.
Groundhouse money. Groundhouse money is what they are.
Yeah.
You'd like to think they can get past the Cubs. It's hard to tell. But you know what? They took 2 or 3 from the Yankees over the weekend to get there. Of course, they had a little help from the Tampa Bay Rays, who had their number over the years. But the Tampa Bay Rays, if I were the Marlins, I'd send the Tampa Bay Rays at least a Christmas card.
I'd send the Phillies a Christmas card, too, for losing when they needed to.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, maybe so, but the Marlins handled the Phillies pretty well throughout the year.
They did, yeah.
I mean, Don Mattingly, I would ask him during one of our press conferences about the Rays. I said, well, they are a model organization. They're the model for which we have to follow is what they are. I never had the chance to ask them over the weekend because they're awful the bigger national media now talking about their success, but I knew I wanted to know about what it would be like for that you got an assist from the Rays, but that never came to fruition. I know what he would have answered. I had a chance to talk to him enough times to get an idea how the guy thinks. But I want to go back to this virus for a second. You think about it, okay? In a matter of days, it went from 1 player with the virus to 4 players to 13 to 15 to 18. I mean, this thing kept going bigger and bigger and bigger by the minute. And then, yet with all of that, okay, they're still the number 1 seed in the 2020 playoffs. They posted a winning season following a 105-loss campaign that we just talked about last year. And their last winning season was 2009. And their last postseason was when they won the World Series in 2003 against The New York
Yeah,
Yankees.
and I find that interesting. No matter, and like we discussed before with Stuart Hack, the Yankees and the Marlins are always going to be compared because it's the same blueprint.
Right.
I find it fascinating that they had to beat the Yankees to get in the playoffs. I find it fascinating too that they did it in New York against New York, a team that they were already in the playoffs. They could have just laid down, and they didn't. They made Miami earn it, and there could still be. There's always going to be the possibility of the Yankees and the Marlins working a deal at some point because of the familiarity of Jeter and Mattingly with their front office. So you're looking at a team that will be a mirror image of the Yankees maybe 2 or 3 years down the line because of the way that they built their team through the minor league system and made trades at the right time.
Yeah, but you tell me though, David. You've been around a lot longer than I have. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
do you think if for any other connection that the Marlins could have gotten rid of Giancarlo Stanton's contract with any other team, perhaps outside the Dodgers, with the Yankees to take on that hefty contract, what the Yankees are willing to take?
Right. It's 320. Was it 325 million? Was what 13 years. It was an albatross. The older management, by the way, Michael Hill was part of that when part of the old regime. He came over when Derek Jeter bought the team from Jeffrey Lurie. Dodgers, Yankees, maybe the Red Sox, but he was born to be in. From that trade, it's like, okay, he goes to play pinstripes. Not born to be, but it makes a lot of sense. I'll say this: when the Marlins were under the old ownership group, this was a bunch of players who were succeeding, but there was no team chemistry. This was individual success.
Right.
The group today, a lot like Michael Hill talked about, they're all playing for each other. They're in that clubhouse supporting each other. They're younger. That Novocaine is there where they don't know any better, which we've referred to before.
Right.
Rookies go out there, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, whatever it is, rookies go out there and they're themselves. They don't know how to act or what to do. And that's part of the reason why this team has been successful. All these guys want to do is play baseball. Right. They don't understand maybe the magnitude of everything they're doing. And this is the most nondescript team the Marlins have had. You and I talked about it before. In 97 and 2003, there was character on this team. Jeff Conine, Dontrell Willis, Derek Lee, Miggy Cabrera. These are all players who impacted baseball for years. We don't have anybody on that roster right
now. You know what? Stuart Hack and I had K.R. Lombardi on. He's a former Tampa baseball coach. Yeah. And K.R. Lombardi summarized the Yankees as being a team made out of glass. And I found that to be an interesting observation, but as the year went on, it's pretty hard to argue against that because the amount of injuries that the Yankees did sustain during the course of the year. I mean, practically everybody went down. When their roster started to come back together, and they were able to manage to work their way into playoffs. How effective they will be in the postseason now, I'm not so sure that the New York Yankees are that surefire World Series participant that many of us thought initially. But I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Cream rises to the top, and you know that. And we look at the Yankees and we're thinking there's another team there that could do that. I would love to see Tampa Bay in the World Series, just because it's a well-oiled machine. Everything there has worked this year.
Right.
But your blue bloods are still going to impact what happens with the playoffs. And you also know that television contract is praying that this is something like the Dodgers and the Yankees in the World Series, because that brings in money. And the bottom line is it's money driven. I would love to see the Marlins first of all, if the Marlins do get past the Cubs, if the Marlins do get past the Cubs, I will start to think more clearly about them getting to the World Series, but I have to watch what happens. We're going to pray that there is no Bartman incident. We're going to pray that there is no, controversy or anything like that. It's just baseball, Scott.
But are they allowing fans at Wrigley Field, David? I don't think that they are they?
No, they're not. But I'm
Oh,
saying there's not going to be any controversy this year.
I'm just dusting your chops.
I know. Okay.
So let's talk about Don Mattingly, okay?
Sure.
Guy's from Evansville, Indiana. He's Yankee team captain from 91 to 95. The only
Right.
to have his number retired without having won a World Series. His number's retired. His number 23, and he does have a monument. He has a Monument Park honoree. And there's a little interesting stat. His number 18 number was actually retired for the AA Nashville Sounds.
Right.
At one point, he was there to actually see it. But you want to talk about a humble guy. Okay, he coaches with Joe Torre, 2004 Yankees, followed him to the Dodgers, and subsequently took over that job. But here's something that few people should know when they look up the Don Mattingly. Okay, he had an MLB record in 1987, 6 Grand Slams in one season, and those are the only ones of his career. And he's the first manager in franchise history with the Dodgers to actually lead them to 3 straight postseason appearances in the Dodgers, David. Now,
I know.
Obviously, you know, it's a lot easier to get in the playoffs these days than it was when you had to win the division and that, so I don't know how much you account for it, but to still think he has that distinction. Now, to make matters even more interesting from a statistical standpoint, you know, these kids are learning from a guy who's a true pro, okay?
Right.
They always say great players can't lead. Well, Don Mattingly may not be a Hall of Famer, but he's bordering around great versus legendary. And let me back it up with a few other things. He's a 6-time All-Star, 9-time Gold Glove winner, won the batting title in 1984 with a .343 average. And you know who finished second behind him?
84?
Yeah.
Alan Trammell.
Dave Winfield.
Winfield, okay. All right. Well, there you go.
And then in 1979, when he got drafted in the 19th round by the Yankees, his signing bonus was all of $23,000, okay? But I think but what's interesting when you put things in perspective is Buck Showalter, Mattingly's last manager during his playing days and his former teammate in the minor leagues, attributes Mattingly's calmness to the controversies that he was subjected to during his time with the Yankees. So, you know, I mean, think about it. Here's a guy, I did ask him before, though, during one of our press conferences, whether he got involved in the hitting instructing for a while. And why not? All he did was have a lifetime batting average of .307 with 2,153 hits, 222 home runs, and 1099 home runs. No, I'm not talking about the 1099 you sign when you have an employer, but 1099 home run. Just had to tie that in.
He is, I'm going to use a really bad, he's as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Right.
You don't see him wavering. I mean, he is a player's coach. He is a great student of the game. Maybe one of the best defensive first basemen that ever played. You know, that's something that is overlooked. I know when we talk about whether Mattingly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and I believe he does, just like Dale Murphy and other people who have been scratched. And remember, too, that when he was given the contract extension last year, it was, 2 weeks before the season was over. And they were looking at setting a record of futility. And everybody was like, no, he needs to go. And Jeter specifically said, I need him to see this through. Derek Jeter knew what he was doing. Derek Jeter told him, remember, they only played together 1 year in Yankee pinstripes. And he said, at some point, I'm going to own a major league team. And Don Mattingly said, I believe him. You know, they knew what they were doing.
Well, I mean, let's face it. You have, you know, the Yankee culture down in Miami. All you say, I-95, you can take it all the way from Miami all the way up to Maine, and before you get to Maine, you go to New York City, and that's where you're at. Now, I've never taken that drive, not to say I won't one day down the road. I've taken the I-75 jaunt, but I get the drill where, indeed, when you have a successful culture like you had in New York, then you have Don Mattingly, who's a manager of it, and Derek Jeter. You know, let's face it, he had one of our Zoom calls, and he did say, hey, you know, we have to get out in front of it. We have to show accountability of it. But he said there were lots of mistakes, and we will own those mistakes. we will get better. Well, they
Right.
did. This team was a
Are you
laughing stock,
right?
David, when this
Right.
took place.
Are you surprised it's this season? Because we had talked about it being 2 and 3 years away, but we didn't know how the pitching staff would come together. Remember, we did the preview a few months ago. I told you that thought they would win 30 games. Excuse me, and they did. But I also didn't think that they would be a true playoff contender yet. Sorry. Sorry. I get old and cough a little bit. This is exciting. Fans are excited in South Florida. Fans are excited in the state. They have two teams. We wouldn't have really we expected Tampa Bay to be there. I didn't expect Tampa and Miami to be there together. I think this is great for Major League Baseball, especially since one plays in a really awful stadium, the other one plays in a great stadium, but isn't as successful as the other team.
Well,
Excuse me.
The only problem with Marlins Park, and I love the park, and I've been there many a times, is it's just not as accessible to
right.
the north. Other than
it's a beautiful
it's a dynamite stadium.
Oh yeah,
place.
It is beautiful. How about this, Scott? We talked about the Yankees and how the Marlins have done their job to follow the Yankee way. Mm-hmm. For a while, I thought they were following paths of the Chicago Cubs, the Atlanta Braves, the Houston Astros that built their teams up through minor league systems by trade or acquisition or drafting. And he's had 2 really good drafts the last 2 years. But when you look at everything, the Miami way could be the future of how other teams who have fallen off will build their team now. So it makes Jeter look like a genius.
I've always thought that Derek Jeter was a genius anyways.
No.
But so nothing will ever change my opinion of Derek. Derek Jeter is a good
guy.
And, he was able to get George Steinbrenner to be called, you're a genius, okay?
Right.
But I think the key with any contending team, though, David, is you better have a good lot of young studs, but you need to have some seasoned veterans that have been there. So when you talk about Corey Dickerson being there with the Marlins, Jesus Aguilar was a great pickup for him. But Don Mattingly told me about Jesus Aguilar. I've always liked him dating back to his days when he was Milwaukee. So I think when the opportunity to get Aguilar came, the Marlins didn't think twice about it. And you can rest assured Jesus Aguilar may not be looking to leave Miami too quick. Obviously, they're going to have to pay him a little bit more money to keep him. I think it's here on a free agent deal. But Jesus
Aguilar is a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah.
Aguilar was okay, and Dickerson is 2. Let's also talk about homegrown talent, if you could. Just for a minute, if you don't mind. Edward Cabrera is a homegrown talent who could be a number 1 ace. The thing that the Marlins have done is they have found themselves pitchers who can come in and serve in that 1 or 2 spot and not skip a beat. Brian Anderson is the player that they will build this team around at third base. He is their future. We've discussed it that I think he could be a Larry Walker type of player who has to increase his batting average, but he led the team with home runs this year. He plays outstanding defense at third base. He can also play in right field. Jazz Chisholm came over in a trade last year. He played in Jacksonville last year. The name escapes me again. I'm sorry. Levin Diaz, who was a trade with Minnesota last year, he was in Jacksonville. Sixto Sanchez, who was going to be their ace, was in Jacksonville. This is a team built for the future. It's quite impressive.
Well, I mean, and here's the thing: they drafted a wealth of pitching during the draft this year. So Max Meyer, pencil him in down the road, out of the University of Minnesota. If you're a talent out of the University of Minnesota, you're doing pretty well.
I think he winds up being their closer because there's just so many arms right now. He's going to have to wheel and deal for everyday players because the minor leagues are so loaded. And Meyer is that big kid that, comes out of the bullpen like Bruce Sutter, named from the past. And he has that kind of mechanic.
Well, Starling Marte was a good midseason pickup as well.
It's a great pickup. They knew going in that if they had any early success that they would have to buy, not sell, and that's exactly what they did. They made the right move.
Well, again, you can only get away with making those moves if you feel you're fairly close.
Right.
I think the Marlins knew that as the year went on, they knew that they had a chance to get in. That,
Sure.
you can always make a trade like trading in Jonathan Villar, for whom the Blue Jays needed. So I view that what happened there, the moves that they were making were win-win moves. But it's easy to make a move or two here and there if it's a win-win, but you don't mortgage the future. And if you do, such as the case of the Boston Red Sox, where Dave Dombrowski mortgaged the future,
right?
You get players. That was his style here when he was with the Florida Marlins.
Right, with the Marlins, right? He was Trader Jack, he made those kind of moves. The Marlins are in maybe the best situation they have ever been, and I know that this Jeter has nothing to do with two World Series titles, but he's providing consistency. In other words, if they do well this year and they compete next year for a pennant or compete for a division title, they can do it 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Kind of like what was done with the Dodgers when Mattingly was their skipper. He didn't plan for this to be a win-now situation. It just happened that way. And that's because it's a shorter season. Everybody's competing at the same level. The Marlins just caught lightning in a bottle, and it seems like they can continue to do that after this season because of what they've done internally.
So I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
Sure.
If there's one word, and this was asked the other day at the presser, by the way, but I'm going to ask you the same question, okay?
Sure.
That describes this Miami Marlins team. What do you say that word is? One word.
One word.
Just
shocking.
One? Okay.
Shocking.
Okay.
Yeah, shocking.
I'll give you my word. Resilient.
That's a good one, too. That's a real good one. We talked about this. There's no guy that stands out on this roster. Miggy Cabrera was great as a rookie, and Dontrelle Willis was flamboyant as a pitcher. Even Kevin Brown was dominant. They had character when they won their first two World Series titles. There is nobody that stands out on this roster. Maybe Starlin Marte, but there is nobody that will say, "Hey, come jump on my back, and I'll take you to the World Series." It's nothing like that.
No,
Don Mattingly.
If I had one guy that I probably might put there, I believe that is the heart of this team, though, Dave, might be Miguel Rojas.
Yes, and he's the glue that holds it together, just like players of the past that, Martin Prado was the team captain, and he's the most respected man in the clubhouse. He didn't do much, but he added a spark. I agree I agree with your analysis. It's perfect. This is a team of players who are playing for each other. They're not playing individually. Stanton, Yelich, Ozuna, JT Realmuto had great seasons in Marlins uniforms, but they didn't play for each other. They played basically to get out of Miami.
Right.
You know?
Well, that's true. And obviously, look where their careers went. Now, I think if there was a guy that could play for each other, Miguel Cabrera could be one of those that would play for each other, but not in the instances with those guys. But now one guy that they were hoping who would be the anchor of their catchers was Francisco Cervelli, but this guy got banged up and got his concussion issue. He's still an influence in the clubhouse. He's like a coach on the field, but they were hoping that he would be a bigger part of stabilizing that pitching staff, in a sense, giving it leadership there. Now, don't get me wrong, the guys they've had have done a very suitable job, but Cervelli was brought in there to be the quarterback behind the plate, so to speak.
Definitely, I agree with you. And no disrespect to Jorge Alfaro, but it's a different situation. Chad Wallach has done a really good job as of late because they have that veteran presence. I'm wondering what happens after the playoffs because they have decisions to make. Do they keep the nucleus together or do they try and get themselves a veteran? I'd love to see Real Muto back in Miami. I don't think that happens. I mean, that's a dream scenario. Since Cervelli has had concussion issues, does he come back? I mean, that, from my understanding, it was pretty significant.
Yeah, you know what, David? Judging by what I can see right now, Don Mattingly is more concerned about his life right now, more so than his career. And that's
Right, exactly. I read the notes. Your life is a heck of a lot more important than swinging a stick. You know that.
Yeah. I
He,
mean,
he was a perfect fit for what they're trying to do.
you think about some catchers that have taken one guy that I had an opportunity to get to know a couple of years ago when I was in Arizona was Al Avila. And you talk
Yeah,
about a guy that took a beating behind the plate, one
he was
concussion
blistered.
at a time.
Yeah, he was blistered. So where does the team go from here? We start the playoffs on Wednesday. They
Right.
open up playing Chicago. It's the Cubs. It's the mystique. It's we're here. That type of thing. Do you see them getting past the first round?
Well,
You can say no. I see the look.
you know what? I'm not. I guess I could say I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I don't say no. I wouldn't. Here's the thing. I won't bet against this team considering what they've gone against.
No.
I
It's
won't.
the field story of the year.
I've talked to a lot. I've talked to Mattingly countless of times, listening to the comments from the players throughout the course of the year. This team right now has everything to gain, nothing to lose. Nobody thought they'd ever get here anyways. They don't even care. They're playing fearless. They don't. I mean, these guys here, they say that even a rookie can talk into this clubhouse and they'll listen to them. They don't have any prima donnas. I mean, you talk about a bunch of guys that love each other. This group here definitely has a type of character that managers love, that they play for each other, love each other. You get the draw,
Right. I like the makeup of this team. And I know that there are going to be players who are on this roster right now. They'll be back in the minors next year because of circumstance. But I really like the makeup of this team. I also think that Jeter, Mattingly's going to ask for another power hitter somehow because they need it. I don't know who they sacrifice because they've got a load of pitching talent they could use. Even in single A and double A, they could trade away. Gerard Encarnacion was the guy that made the leap that we had talked about. He is a future power hitter. He still needs a year or two in the minors. I would hope that they would keep him, but a lot of teams are going to be interested in that kid. This team is built to win 2-3 years from now and go 5 or 6 years winning division titles. It's exciting. We haven't had this before.
Well, here's the one intangible that we have to really think about, though. You might be able to get players a little bit more economical because of COVID-19. They're not going to get some of those bigger mega contracts, David, that you might have gotten during a non-COVID year. So to sign a multi-year deal with a guy who, could be an impact player, again, why do you think you stock up on young talent? Not to unload all of it, but you want to be able to make sure that you're able to get that player or two that can make a difference. Remember, we only saw a 60-game sample size here. Another 162, and you find out what your team was really made out of. And so that's what you have to. That's a determination that has to be made. So, I think that you're right. You don't know what you have at in the Class A level or whatnot, but how many players? Well, again, we're talking about the game year compared to 162. But the one thing that's been so invaluable to this team, and Don Mattingly and the whole front office and every coaching staff and all have stressed upon this team, you guys are getting such playoff experience right now that you cannot even begin to realize how invaluable this experience is for you, not only next year, but in the years to come.
Right. This was a blueprint, and I don't know, 3 years ago, he said, I have a blueprint. This is what I'm going to do. I'm destroying it and building it back up. He took pitching first because he knew that the arms would need years to develop. Once he got his core of young talent on the mound, he made sure he had players who could play in the outfield and could hit because there was such a lack of power in the minor league system. And then he started to fill things in around the diamond, and he went straight up the middle for catcher to second base to the center field. He made sure he did these things. Everything that Derek Jeter has swung at with the Marlins, like it or not, he's hit a home run. And I know people are pissed that Christian Yelich isn't there anymore. And I know that, the Stanton thing, it's hit or miss. But Christian Yelich was the big guy, and I have said this before, even when he was just starting out, he was going to be a bigger deal than Giancarlo Stanton. Stanton's there to hit home runs. Christian Yelich is maybe one of the 5 most complete players in baseball today. Those things bothered Marlins fans, and they thought that Derek Jeter didn't know what he was doing, and they complained, and they wanted money back. They didn't want their tickets. Now everybody's going to jump on the Marlins train.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. Everybody associates the Marlins as being a team where they've had fire sales, and it's pretty hard to debate that when you had Wayne Hines,
right,
then Jeffrey Loria. But I think with Derek Jeter, you have to give him his due and believe that he's the exception to the rule for sure.
Right. It's exceptional rule because he has staying power. When Huizinga bought the Marlins, bought the Marlins, and he brought them to Major League Baseball, it was an experiment. He was successful at football. He had Don Shula, then he had Jimmy Johnson. He bought the team, and it was good for the team. And then he sold it to Loria, who didn't like it from day one, and it was bad. And what do? You win World Series titles, and then you sell all your players off. And he was bleeding money, and he had problems with the city with the contract for the stadium that you've discussed before. This is the right fit, and Derek Jeter he's still the face of this franchise. You have to look at it that way. If you say Miami Marlins, who's the first person you think about? Derek Jeter. Or Don Mattingly. It's not a player. We got to get to the point where the player is the face of this franchise.
Well said, as always. Yeah.
All right.
Well said. Well, just so you know, folks, you're listening to South Florida. You're listening and watching the South Florida Tribune podcast. My name is Scott Morgan out the Motor City Badmouth. I'm joined tonight on this special broadcast by David Levin. David Levin has worked with us a lot. He's a writer for the South Florida Tribune. He covers the Jacksonville Jaguars and does a lot of work with the Miami Marlins. We're really happy to have David on, and we always look forward to bringing David on when the situation presents itself. And here, as the Miami Marlins get set to take on the Chicago Cubs on Wednesday in the playoffs, I figured this was a perfect opportunity to give David an opportunity to come on. And, he's seen a lot of these young players, and without a doubt, if there's anybody that can give you some great insights, indeed, it's David. So, well, David, any closing thoughts before we wrap up the broadcast? Why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. You guys, I have featured work on fansided.com with Marlin Maniac, and I have it Black and Teal. I'm on Twitter. I have 2 accounts now, Real Teal Dave 1, and then I have one with DM719907. And, of course, I'm writing for the South Florida Tribune. Check my work out there. I try to do a good job for Scott and see what we can do, but I cover the baseball and the football end of that as well. This has been exciting, Scott. I only wish the playoff games were in Miami because I really try to find a way to sneak myself in there. Because I've never seen a Major League Baseball playoff game, believe it or not. But I've seen plenty of regular season. This is too cool.
Well, I was actually at the game. I think it was in 2003. I got there. I didn't know I had a credential until like the 4th inning. And I ended up getting there for the decisive game when Pudge Rodriguez took that collision to plate. I didn't want to go in the Giants locker room. I ended up going to the Marlins back then. But I also saw Game 3 of the 1968 World Series. My dad ended up taking me there.
Nice.
So there are a couple little things here and there that I've gone.
That one.
But you're not a good writer. You're an excellent writer, David. I mean, I've never seen it. This guy, folks, is a writing machine is what he is. I've never seen – he writes stories faster than the auto industry goes ahead and cranks out automobiles. And he does a heck of a job doing it. So talk about a writing machine. That's a compliment, by the way, Mr. Levin.
I know. Thank you. So, this was fun. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, also I should let people know that you can catch the South Florida Tribune podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or where you get your podcasts. I'll say it again. You can gain this on the Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Also follow us on social media, Twitter at Tribune South, Facebook and Instagram, follow us at South Florida Tribune. YouTube channel, please subscribe to that, South Florida Tribune. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll find all of our content there from our columnists as well as our media distribution partners and the broadcaster are there. And you can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to do so, Scott Morganroth. So, meanwhile, on behalf of David Levin, my name is Scott Morganroth from Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the South Florida Tribune podcast. And until the next time, you have yourself a great rest of the night. Good night, everybody. Good night,
everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.